The truth which expresses itself in our language with the word God, which is felt inside us and outside too. We see that love as the means to realize the truth, to experience the God. God cannot be experienced or realized through the power of reason. It is not open to reason. Also, it being all powerful, you cannot conquer God with any power at your disposal, because God is more powerful than that. Like a person, you can make that person comply to what you say. If you are more powerful, the power is of various types. The power, say, power of, your body, physical power, or the power of wealth, or intellectual power. But God is beyond, all these, is far more powerful than all these put together. So how then can I really come close to God? How can God become mine? How that God who fills the universe can become actually my God? How can that God come to my possession? Only one power is there with which God can be brought to to our possession. It becomes my God. How my God? It is out of power of love. The power of love is tremendous. That is how the little babies, they make their far more powerful parents do what they want. How it is, babies do not have physical power to compel the parents. They do not have anything that they can call their own, but power of love, that then overtakes all other obstacles, even very powerful ones. And so this has been told as the means of realizing God. The reason falls far behind. Our intellectual prowess doesn't reach there. But when we learn to love and find the source of all love, then the things start in a way falling in place, because the God is our reality. And everybody knows to love. It is spontaneous. Even you do not say the person knows. It is the intrinsic unity of the existence that expresses itself as love. That is the essence of love. When you feel the oneness, the lover and the beloved, they feel a sense of being one, a unit, bound together as it were. That togetherness, that oneness is the essence of love. And when we see that essence is really expressing itself as the love or the connection, loving connection between different creatures, we will be able to see that it is really the love of God. That alone is the true love. Other loves come and go. In fact, we see that at times they get converted into hatred too. It is why? Because they were the reflections of love. The real love is love for God, who is our very self. And that we learn from what we are going to discuss today, a great sport between Lord Krishna and the gopis. This story is heard by so many people, whether in India or in America, the story of the immense love of gopis and the corresponding love of Lord Krishna for them has been the subject of a lot of poetry, folklore, drama, and so forth. One important thing in this whole episode sometimes gets forgotten, and that the gopis are not women as such. It is a beautiful allegoric presentation of the attraction of a woman to man or man to woman. But that is only allegory. Gopis are all the souls that are in search of Lord. And the gopis, they depict those souls who are just wanting to realize or experience God. They don't want anything else. Those souls are represented by gopis, and they are all, therefore, they are in mad love with Krishna. Krishna, the etymology of the word is that which attracts. The source of attraction is Krishna. Karshayati iti Krishna. The Sanskrit word Krishna comes from this to pull towards it, to draw towards it. So, Krishna is the one who draws everything towards it. Whatever attraction in this world that anybody ever experiences, the source of that attraction is God. God is the only source of attraction. It sometimes gets reflected here and there, and so we go from this place to that place in search of love, because we see it reflected in so many places. Like if the sun is reflected in water, we think that the sun is there and can rush to water to get the sun. But sun is actually not there, and therefore knowing that we got attracted there, but when we see that the sun is actually not there, we turn away from that. That is how all the love in the world is, that you get attracted, but then see that that is not what you really were looking for, and then that attraction turns towards repulsion, turns in some other direction. So this whole idea is very poetically, in a very, very sublime way. One cannot really put it in words that how sublime this poetry of this great treatise Bhagavatam is. Srimad Bhagavatam is the work in which God is described as obtained by gopis through love. God, who was brought in the possession in their possession by gopis. How? By love. And that description we will see, but before that, let us see how this great book begins with the description of God as truth. The only possible description of God can be truth, absolute, truth itself, that which appears in the world in multifarious form. So with that verse, any discourse on Bhagavatam is traditionally begun by reciting that verse, and I will do that. Janmadhyasya yatonvayaditaratashchartheshvabhijñaswarat tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayah tejo varimridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha Dhamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi. Satyam param dhimahi. That we meditate on the truth supreme. And how is that truth supreme? The divine from whom the creation, sustenance and dissolution of the universe take place, who is both the material and instrumental cause of it, who is omniscient, who is the only one having self-mastery, being the one independent entity, who illumined the minds of Brahma with the Vedic revelation, whose wisdom is the wonder of even the greatest of the sages, in whom the worlds, the manifestation of the three gunas, subsist in reality without in the least affecting him, just as the combination of the material elements like fire, water and earth subsist in their causes without changing their elemental nature, in whose light of consciousness there is no place for anything false. On that supreme truth we meditate. So, this is the idea. We meditate on the supreme truth. And being supreme, it is immutable. Nothing can affect it. Nothing can act on it. It is supreme and thus remains immutable. Without changing, it produces this appearance of multifarious, continuously changing forms of infinite variety, interacting constantly with each other. It produces that without having any change in itself. A feeble analogy is given like that of the ocean, which while remaining one, continuously is giving rise to infinitely many rising and falling waves of various sizes and shapes. So also from that immutable Lord, this universe arises and falls. And in the whole process, this truth remains immutable, unchanging. So that truth we all seek. We meditate on that means we are seeking that, because that is the source of everything that we actually look for in life. All the happiness, all peace, all love, all life really is derived from that. And thus we seek that. That seeking soul, when that seeking becomes intense and conscious, unconsciously we all are seeking that. But when it becomes a conscious search, it becomes deliberate. No, I want it. And it becomes intense. Like now I cannot survive without it. Then that soul gets called as gopis. And that truth, God, about which we just read, the unchanging substratum of everything, assumes human form to bring this teaching to us. So one of that form has appeared in Vrindavan, and I am not going into the details of how this little child grew, but it was so dear to everybody around. Everybody was spontaneously falling in tremendous love with that child. And always seeking this child's company. He was about 7 years old when this incident took place. It is that intensity of love was rising and rising. The soul wanted to realize, to experience this tremendous love of God. And so, on one full moon day night, this incident of manifestation of that love took place. These gopis, it is described in this book in its 10th volume, between chapters 29 and 33, or 34 also. So 29 to 33, these 5 chapters really are the essence of this story of love of gopis. So these gopis on that evening, as usual, they were busy at their home doing various chores. They were all cowherds, so they had milked the cows before the dusk. As the cows come in from after grazing, they would milk the cows and then come in their home. Now the cows are in the cow shed. The gopis are busy with their evening meals cooking, boiling the milk, and so many other things, feeding the little ones. And at that time, Lord Krishna, God incarnate as man, as this little child, sees that the description is very, very poetic and beautiful, that the moon of that season has risen. Actually, that is why I took this topic this Sunday, is that full moon day was just 4 days back. So I was remembering that coincidence, and so when I decided I will speak on this, and thus it is Lord sees that the eastern sky is beautifully crimson, reddish by the glow of the rising moon, because that is the season when the rains are all over. There is no dust in the atmosphere. The sky is bright, and so it looks very beautiful. So the moon has risen, making everything so pristinely beautiful in its light. And now Lord thinks this is the appropriate, propitious time for the sport of divine love. And thus he started playing the flute. It was kind of a call to gopis. He started playing the flute. Now, there were so many people, but everybody did not hear the flute. Only the gopis heard the flute, not others. Because that flute is a call of God. Who can hear the call of God? Only those who have that devotion rising up in their heart. So, gopis could hear that. Even now, that flute of Krishna is actually playing, and the fortunate ones can hear that. Those who have really love for God, they can hear the Krishna's flute even now. And so what happens then? That, and I am quoting from the book, today's lecture is mostly going to be reading. Hearing those love-inspiring notes, the minds of the women of Raja, that is gopis, flew to Krishna with their earrings dangling in their agitation. They hurried to the tryst with their lover. But no single one amongst them knew the movements of the others because of their total absorption in Krishna. That is one important point to be noted, that the one thing that happens to a devotee is the devotee forgets everything. What others are doing is not important. What my love for God, that is important. Everything else is kind of forgotten. This is to be seen, let us reflect on it as to how we do. Our attention is what the other person is doing. Is that person doing right or not? I forget about myself if what I am doing. The attention is outside. As one becomes devotee, the devotee thinks of oneself and God alone and nothing else. And thus they were oblivious of what other gopis are doing. They did not texted each other that what are you going to do? Did you hear the flute of God? And then what are your plans of meeting him? No, they just rushed out. That some engaged in milking, but put down the milking pail and ran. Did not bother to finish what they are doing. Some kept the milk on the hearth for warming, but forgot to take it down. And others did not remember to remove the pot of porridge on the stove. Those engaged in serving food, those feeding infants at their breast, those attending to the personal needs of their husbands, those taking their food, gave up all these chores and hurried to Krishna's presence. Nothing in the world is more important than that. That is the sign of a devotee. God is the highest priority. The call of the God is the highest priority. It is like, a fireman sitting at the fire station gets the call, and now everything, is put there. It doesn't matter, come on, we have to rush out now. It is in a minute, they are in the truck and it starts. If they say, no, let me finish my food, then by that time the house will be burnt, So it is, they know that that is the highest priority, whatever else they may be doing. So the gopis, the devotees, they know God is the highest priority in life. Nothing else really matters at all. All this appears like a dream. This world appears like a dream, just as a person woken from the dream. And suppose in the dream that person had kept a pot of milk to boil on fire. When wakes up, can that person think, oh, the milk will boil and spill over? No, that was dream. That wasn't real. And because the reality of God is so powerfully takes over, just as the reality of the waking state takes takes over so much over our idea or our memory of dream, that it doesn't matter anymore. That was dream. So these gopis just rushed. That is what happens to a devotee. The highest priority is God. All other things, okay, secondary. What does it matter? What does they? If we think we understand, what do they after all matter? But it is the gopis have come to that state, and that is why they become they really eligible to have this love for God, and they rush to God. There were a few of them who were restrained by their relatives at home. No, you can't go at this hour. It is night. There are the wild animals moving around. There are snakes, this, that. At that time, you should not go out. It doesn't look good also that you young women rushing out at night like this. No. And they locked them. But what happened then? They left their bodies and their souls went to Lord Krishna. They dropped their bodies. And bodies can be restricted in a room. Can the soul be? No. And can you see, bodily you can be restricted here on your chairs, but you may fly away, So it is. They therefore went to the presence of Krishna, and then Lord says to them, just to test them. So he tries to tell them, go back. Why have you come here? This is not the right time. It is, please go back. And so Lord tells them that, you see, O fair ones, night is naturally awe-inspiring. It is time when dangerous animals move about. So return to your homes soon. It is not befitting that women linger in place like this. Not finding at home, your parents, sons, brothers and husbands will be searching for you everywhere. It is not proper for you to give trouble to your relatives. And Krishna is trying to tell them, go back quickly. Otherwise, everybody will be worried, anxious that what happened to you. So now you please hurry back to Vraja. If, however, you have come here out of attraction inspired by love for me, it is not much to be wondered at, for all creatures seem to love me. You good ladies, don't you know that the highest duty of women consists in attending to their husbands or their parents or their children, in looking after them? So he tries to, tell them that it is not, it is dangerous to be out at this time. Also, it is against the norms of the society. Moreover, morally also, it is not right because you have your duties, your chores to be finished. This is, from all sides he tries to tell them how wrong it is. The gopis do not budge from their resolve. They say, O Lord, it behoves thee not to speak so mercilessly. We have abandoned our all to serve thy feet. Accept us as the Supreme Being accepts all who go to him seeking liberation. So we should understand, this is the tale of liberation. Many who do not understand and read the book very superficially depict it as if it is a love story between ordinary men and women. That is not at all. Why should it come in the scriptures then? There would have been many novels and this and that who would paint these things. But this is at a very different plane altogether. The human love is taken up as an imagery. But what is really the import is the divine attraction of God. So they say, therefore, may the advice of thine come true in regard to our relationship with thee, the Lord of all, who formest the topic of instruction of all teachers and scriptures. So many of the verses here, they are very clear indications that the gopis, they knew of Krishna as God incarnate, not as a human being, not an ordinary human being. This is an important aspect in this story. If you look at the age of Krishna, 7 years old, all those love sports that are described cannot be, imagined at that age. So, but the spiritual import is very important. That is the whole idea behind this. So, gopis say that don't say such things, we are not going to go back. It is not possible for us. They say that it is not possible for us. About these gopis, once Sri Krishna wanted to teach the essence of devotion to his favorite disciple, that Uddhava. That Uddhava, you can go and to the gopis, they must be, dying in remembering me. Krishna had at that time come away from where that Vrindavan to Mathura. Actually, Krishna never went back to Vrindavan. Once he came away, that's it. So he was intense lover, but yet intensely unattached. It is something to be noted, Intense detachment was there. So, but he said to Uddhava that why don't you go and console the gopis there who might be crying in my memory, remembering me, and tell them that, I am in everybody's mind. So now, although physically I am away, you can meditate on me with your minds. Focus your minds on me, and then you will start feeling my presence. And the Uddhava, thinking that yes, it is gopis need this message, rushes there. And as soon as he comes, gopis ran and then asked him nothing but how is our Krishna? And then he says, well, Krishna is fine. He sent a message through me. Listen to the message. Lord was very much aware that you are much pained by his absence. But so he has sent this message with me that you can, meditate on him in your mind, and that will bring consolation to you. And the gopis said to Uddhava, well, we could have followed your advice, but our mind is not with us to meditate. With what mind can we meditate? It already had followed Krishna. So that was a lesson to Uddhava actually, that it is the gopis are the greatest devotees. Even Narada, in his very famous aphorisms of devotion, cites the example of gopis as the highest love that sacrifices everything. So gopis, thus were not going to go away from Krishna, whatever Krishna may say. So then Krishna was very pleased with them, that yes, they are not going away, they are my true devotees. And then the loving sport begins there. But what happens when that is an obstacle that devotees have to be careful about? And that obstacle is we get pride. That, oh, see how fortunate and how deserving we few women are. Of all the millions of ladies, God has chosen us. And they were puffed up with pride. And then God vanished from them. It is the thought of I, that I am, if I am more important than God, then God vanishes. There is no possibility of two in love. It is a one-pointed love, God and God alone. It is a beautiful couplet of Kabira is there, the great Sufi saint. He says that the lane of love is very, very narrow. So narrow that it cannot accommodate two. If you are there, then God is not there. And God is there only if you are not there. So, I see how great I am, that even God started loving me, and then the Lord disappears from there. And then they kept on searching for God here and there. They were, the absence of God now brought so much of pain to their heart. Oh, where did he go? And they started searching in that woods nearby on the banks of river Jamuna. Where is God? Everywhere they started. And when you are in some such mad search of a lost object, your reason doesn't really work. They started asking to the plants, the trees, with that, you do that, have you seen our God going there? Did it cross, did he go by this path? You must have surely noticed had he gone. This is very similar, this whole Rasa Leela, this sport with gopis, and this great episode of divine love is very much depicted also in the famous mystical Christian text, Spiritual Canticle of the Soul by St. John of Cross. There the same thing is mentioned, that the beloved is gone, and then the lover started looking and then started asking the plants and so forth, the trees and the plants and the streams, did he cross you? Did you see any marks? And like that. So here the description is far more elaborate than in the Spiritual Canticle of the Soul. So, and when they were not finding, they started imitating Krishna amongst themselves. Various episodes in the life of the Krishna, they started enacting amongst themselves, and still kept the search on. And at one point, they found I am fast forwarding, that we don't have enough time, and you are all very intelligent people. You can fill in the gaps yourselves. So it is at one point that they saw that, well, this is a very thorny path. There are thorns. There are very sharp stones. And our dear Krishna, this baby with such tender feet, walking on these, his feet must have been wounded, lacerated because of this. And that very thought, brought tears to their eyes, and they were now anxious about Krishna. And what happened then? Their thought about their own pain vanished. Now they thought that why Krishna left us and he shouldn't have done like that. All those thoughts were described earlier. And their pride, that all was washed away. And when nothing but Krishna is left in their thought, they saw the reappearance of Krishna. And there the gopis, actually there when Lord reappears, the gopis put a question to Krishna. Now you are again in our grip. So before you escape, let us ask you one question. That what is this kind of love that you are showing? It is so in a somewhat indirect manner they put their question. The gopis spoke to him in a tone with a touch of anger born of frustrated love, while looking archly with quivering brows. The gopis said, "Some love others according as they are loved in return. In contrast to this, some love even those who have no love for them. There are still others who have no love for any, neither for those who love them, nor for those who do not. Please say, who is the most virtuous amongst these three?" Those who love means, if you love me, I love you, like that, There are most people like that. The love has to be mutual, friendship, love. There is a street in Providence. Providence is full of one-way streets, and one of those one-way streets is Friendship Street. So it is. So love, it is, we expect that it is to be mutual. If you don't love me, why should I? I also don't care for you. So there are people mostly like that. Then there are those who love everybody. They are broad-hearted, whether others love me or not, whether whom I loved loves me or not, doesn't bother about it. Loves irrespective of whether the beloved is loving or not loving. And then the third category expressed is, and that is where they want to pin Krishna to that category, and there are those who do not love even those who love them. So in which category does Krishna, which is the best category? So the third actually is, they think they are accusing Krishna that you are like that, that although we loved you with such sacrifice, we gave up everything for you, and you still ran away. So the reply of Krishna is indicative of the true love. It is like this, that he says, in case of mutual love, that is where love is something returned for something got, the motive on both sides is only self-interest. There is no real love or altruism. But, oh pretty girls, those who love others even if they do not require it are of two kinds: men who are by nature kind and loving, and men who are loving like parents. Those who do not love anyone, whether the others love them or not, are of three kinds: Atma Ramas, or those who are absorbed in this self, for whom everyone is included in this self. Apta Kamas, those who are fulfilled, or those who have no wants of any kind and so need not have dealings with anyone. And the brute who has no gratitude or respect for elders or anybody. Oh, friends, however, I do not belong to any of these categories. The love of God for us is of a very special category. It is not like the love with whom we connect in this world. It is not even like the love of parents. It is not love even like the saintly people. The love of God is a very separate category, and that he describes here. Even in regard to persons who love me, I seem to keep away without requiting their love, because it is only by so keeping away that their love will grow through constant meditation. It is like the case of a poor man who has lost all his earned wealth and therefore thinks only of what he has lost. So, that is why I go away, showing them a glimpse. That is how in Upanishads the meditation on the Lord is also described. In Kena Upanishad, how one should meditate on God, it is said that like a lightning. You saw the lightning flash and go away. But that flash you remember and think of it. So God, who came in my presence and gone, what happened to that? See, this glimpse we all get on some special moments. We do feel the presence of God. And then now, hold on to that moment. Be really anxious to get that moment again and again and again. It is that is how the craving for God will increase. And then this chapter continues further till, and I will quickly wrap it up by showing, the last discussion between the king to whom this tale is being narrated. The king Parikshiti, again it is a long story, I don't want to get into these Puranas or mythological scriptures are, story within the story within the story, like that. So this king is being described. This king is aware that within a week he is going to die. And the sage who is telling this story to him, king, that sage Shuka, is considered a sage fully illumined, has no attraction of anything in the world, for anything in the world. That sage is describing this. Just to imprint on our minds, this fact is told again and again, that there is no carnality involved in any of these sports which are described here. So the king asked the question, prayed to by Brahma, the wonderful Lord, Bhagwan, by a part of himself incarnated as Krishna, in order to establish the dharma, the righteousness, and eradicates its opposite, unrighteousness. It is described, in all this sport, which sounds very amorous, full of all sorts of romantic descriptions. Every time it is described that in all this the Lord was still the self of all, without even the slightest change in his attitude. He always had the perfect control of his passions, his being. So now that Lord, this king is asking, why did he indulge in this seemingly immoral sport? Will it not spread this kind of immorality here, that people will start imitating such things in the name of following God? So uh, the sage replies, firstly, he says that supermen have been found to transgress the moral code and indulge in aggressive actions. But just like fire, which can consume anything, be it dirt or poison, and yet can remain pure and unaffected, these powerful ones cannot be contaminated by any evil. But insignificant man should not imitate them in this respect, even mentally. If he behaves like that stupidly, it would be like one who is without the power of Rudra but drinks poison, following Rudra's example. It is true that some champion weightlifter can lift maybe 1,000 pounds easily. But if I go to do it, well, I will die by heart attack. Immediately right there, it will be the last weightlifting attempt by me. So I shouldn't be doing that. It is that person was capable of doing it. So we should remember that we get tempted even by the slightest hint of pleasure somewhere. And can we are we then worthy of even thinking of such a sport? Lord can never be tempted by anything. So that is a big difference. So the teachings of great ones are true and fit to be followed by all. This is so in regard to some of their actions too. So the intelligent man should follow only such of their actions as are consistent with their teachings. So this is the import of it. And then it is elaborated further, but for the want of time, I am not going to discuss those.